The steak on my plate was still sizzling when it happened. Medium rare, perfectly charred, the kind of cut that costs more than my first car's transmission. I had my fork halfway to my mouth, ready to take a bite, when Bradley Cross stood up. He did it with that dramatic flair he always used, like he was about to announce he had single-handedly solved the global supply chain crisis, instead of just coasting on my team's labor. He raised his glass, the crystal catching the harsh light of the steakhouse. "We did it," he said, his voice booming over the chatter of the other tables, the biggest logistics close of the quarter. The clients from Midland Steel clapped, and a few of our junior sales guys even whooped. I just nodded, chewed, and waited for the toast to end so I could finish my dinner. I am 58 years old, and at this point in my career, I do not need the theatrical rollouts. I just want the code to run, and the trucks to move. Vanguard Logistics had been my home for the last 12 years. I built their core routing engine, Pathfinder, from the ground up when it was nothing but a slow database and a prayer. My team, Bradley went on, looking around the long table with a grin that did not reach his eyes, has been absolutely essential. Well, most of them. He paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Some people just do not fit where we are going. Sometimes dead weight slows down the machine, and you have to clear the gears to keep moving forward. A few people chuckled, that nervous, throat-clearing laugh that corporate drones use when they are not sure if the boss is joking or threatening them. Then Bradley turned his gaze directly toward me. "Harvey Vance," he said, "is no longer with the company." Effective immediately, the laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was so thick you could hear the clink of a fork hitting a bread plate 3 seats down. "He is a capable engineer," Bradley continued, talking about me as if I were a piece of retired hardware sitting in the corner of the room instead of a human being sitting 3 feet away from him. But he is a misfit for the modern direction we are heading. We need acceleration, not friction. I did not move. My hand holding the fork did not shake. It just froze in midair. I looked down the table. Leah Patel, my lead developer, looked down at her lap. Even the new intern, Wyatt, refused to meet my eyes. The clients from Midland Steel looked like they had just walked into the wrong funeral. Bradley raised his glass again to momentum, he said. I did not raise my glass. I stood up slowly, my knees popping in the quiet room. I could feel the heat in my face, but my chest was cold. I did not say a word. I did not throw my drink in his face, and I did not make a scene. I just turned and walked toward the exit. Then, a voice cut through the awkward silence from a table nearby. "Excuse me, are you the Harvey Vance who designed the multi-state fleet optimization model at the Chicago Logistics Summit 3 years ago?" I stopped and turned. An older man with silver hair and a tailored Navy suit was looking at me from a table 2 feet away. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding distant even to myself. He nodded once, reached into his breast pocket, and slid a heavy card across the wooden gap between our tables. "Julian Thorne, Thorne Capital," he said. "My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow, don't be late." I looked down at the card. It was thick, matte black, with raised gold lettering. I did not say anything. I just picked it up, nodded back, and walked out into the cool Chicago night air. The shame was a physical weight in my stomach, hot and heavy, but the card in my hand felt solid. It was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking as I unlocked my car. I drove home in silence, the radio off, the hum of the tires on the asphalt the only sound. My inbox was already lighting up by the time I parked in my driveway. Texts from colleagues I had not spoken to in years, pretending to offer condolences, but really just fishing for gossip. "Tough break, Harvey. Let me know if you want to grab coffee." One of the regional managers sent a message saying, "Sometimes you have to get pushed off the ledge to realize you can fly." I wanted to reply and tell him to go hell, but I did not. I did not reply to anyone. I sat on the edge of my bed until the sun started to peek through the blinds, holding Julian Thorne's card in my hand. I had spent 12 years building the nervous system of Vanguard Logistics, and they had discarded me over a steak dinner to save a fraction of a percent on their quarterly budget. But as the clock turned to 7, I stood up, showered, shaved, and put on a clean white shirt. I was 58, not dead. If Bradley Cross wanted to run his empire without the architect, I was more than happy to show him what happens when the columns are removed. At exactly 8:45 a.m., I walked through the heavy glass doors of the Thorne Capitol building in downtown Chicago. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and quiet efficiency, the kind of place where the air conditioning sounds expensive. The receptionist did not ask for my ID when I mentioned Julian Thorne. She simply smiled, typed something into her console, and pointed toward the private elevators. 17, she said. He is expecting you. When the elevator doors slid open, Julian Thorne was standing by the window, looking out over the gray expanse of Lake Michigan. He did not offer me coffee, and he did not start with standard small talk. Instead, he dropped a thick manila folder onto the mahogany table between us. I want you to look at this, he said. I sat down and opened it. Inside were copies of my original technical designs for the Pathfinder system. There were my handwritten notes from 5 years ago, flowcharts marked with red ink, and database schema diagrams that I had drawn during sleepless weekends. One of the pages still had a faint ring from a coffee cup I had spilled in the middle of the night. They watered this down, Julian said, sitting opposite me. Bradley Cross took your architecture, stripped out the safety protocols, and turned it into a pretty presentation for the board of directors so he could claim credit. But underneath the marketing paint, the core logic is yours. I want you to rebuild it. The way you originally designed it, before they compromised the integrity of the code. I looked up from the folder. What is the catch? Julian leaned back in his chair. You disappear, he said. No public launch, no LinkedIn announcements, no GitHub updates. We set up a dummy LLC in Delaware called TerraRoute. You report through it, and we fund you completely. You get total operational autonomy, but you remain a ghost. Can you handle working in the shadows for a year? I looked at the coffee stain on the diagram. It felt like looking at the blueprint of a house I had built with my own hands, only to watch someone else move in and paint the walls beige. I'll need a week to think about it, I said. You have 45 minutes, Julian replied, tapping his watch. I looked him in the eye. I do not need 45 minutes. I am in. We set up our operation in a dusty third-floor office above a commercial dentist in Oak Park. The windows were blacked out with heavy vinyl sheets, and the server racks were hardwired to a local circuit. We did not use cloud hosting, and we did not sync our repositories to external servers. If we wanted to share code, we did it through physical drives or an encrypted local network. I knew who I needed to build this. I called Leah Patel first. She had been my lead systems developer at Vanguard, the one who actually understood the scale of our database indexes. They had sidelined her after my departure, moving her to a QA maintenance role that was insulting to her talent. She did not even ask about the salary when I explained the project. I am leaving my badge on the desk at lunch, she said. She was tired of the corporate politics and the constant disrespect from managers who could not read a single line of SQL. We needed her ability to write highly optimized database schemas. Next was Oliver Cole, a veteran database administrator who had spent 15 years tracking down memory leaks. He had been laid off during a corporate restructure 3 months prior and was working a contract gig that he hated. His laugh over the phone was dry and sharp. Just tell me what server OS we are using, Harvey. I am already packing my laptop. Lastly, I recruited Chloe Miller, our DevOps specialist. She had been flagged by HR at Vanguard after she raised concerns about data security lapses in the production database. She arrived at our Oak Park office carrying 3 prepaid phones and a folder full of network diagrams. If we are doing this, she said, we do it right. No digital paper trails. We will build our own secure VPN tunnels, run our own DNS resolution, and ensure that not a single byte of traffic can be traced back to our physical location. She was a genius at network security, and her caution was exactly what we needed to keep Vanguard from discovering our work prematurely. For the next 6 months, we worked like ghosts. We did not have Slack channels, and we did not use standard project boards. Every task was written on a physical whiteboard and erased as soon as the code was committed. We worked long hours, fueled by cheap diner food and a shared quiet anger. The new architecture, which we named TerraRoute, was a masterpiece of data engineering. We optimized the routing algorithm to process multi-state freight movements in under 30 seconds compared to the 10 minutes it took Vanguard's outdated system. Every test we ran showed a 30% improvement in fuel efficiency and a near-zero error rate in driver scheduling. I would sit in the corner of the office late at night, watching the simulation runs update on the main screen. The green lines of the routes spread across the map like nerves, clean and fast. We were building a weapon line by line, and nobody outside that room even knew we existed. The first crack in Vanguard's armor appeared on a Tuesday in late spring. My phone buzzed in the middle of the night. It was Leah. "Harvey, look at Midline Transit's tracking system," she said, her voice tight with excitement. I pulled up our monitoring portal. Midline Transit was a major mid-tier freight company that had been one of Vanguard's most stable clients for nearly a decade. They had quietly migrated their active fleet routing to an undisclosed platform 3 days prior. The load signature was unmistakable, the optimization pathing, the container stacking logs, the automatic customs clearance protocols. It was our system. They were using TerraRoute. Leah had spent 3 hours tracing the API telemetry. She pointed out that the network packet structure and the query execution plans matched our custom routing logic exactly. We could see the system rerouting 200 trucks around a massive derailment in Indiana in real time. It was beautiful. Within 48 hours, 2 other regional carriers reached out to our dummy LLC contact page. They did not use corporate emails, just generic accounts, but the messages were clear. "We heard you have a system that actually handles weather disruptions without locking up the database. We want a demo." "We do not do demos," I wrote back. "We run live trials." I knew that a demo was just an opportunity for them to steal our interface designs. If they wanted to see the power of TerraRoute, they had to trust us with a subset of their live fleet. Meanwhile, Vanguard systems were beginning to show the strain of my absence. Bradley Cross had tried to upgrade Pathfinder to what he called version 2.0, but without my team to manage the database schema migrations, the platform was crumbling. API endpoints were throwing constant timeout errors, and the route logging was failing during peak shipping hours. The database servers were experiencing massive CPU spikes, reaching 99% utilization, resulting in frequent deadlocks. Clients were complaining that their shipping manifests were disappearing from the portal. Oliver managed to intercept a leaked recording of an all-hands call at Vanguard. Bradley was standing in front of a digital whiteboard, his tie undone, shouting at the operations team. "This is not a software issue," he yelled. "It is poor documentation left behind by the legacy team. The interns made changes without authorization." He was blaming the kids for his own incompetence. I watched the video on my monitor, and any lingering hesitation I had about what we were doing vanished. The next morning, a heavy cream envelope arrived at our Oak Park office via certified mail. It was addressed to me from Vanguard's legal department, cease and desist. The letter accused me of IP theft, breach of my non-compete agreement, and corporate sabotage. They demanded that I shut down TerraRoute immediately and hand over all source code, architecture diagrams, and hardware. They claimed that the entire routing engine was proprietary technology owned exclusively by Vanguard. The language was aggressive, filled with threats of immediate injunctions and statutory damages, clearly designed to make a solo engineer panic. I did not panic. I put the letter in my bag and drove to the Loop to meet Julian Thorne and our attorney, Audrey Finch. Audrey was a sharp woman in her late 40s who looked at legal disputes the way a chess master looks at an open board. She read the letter once, smiled, and threw it onto the table. "They are desperate," she said. "They know they cannot fix their database, and they are trying to scare you. Let's look at your original employment contract." She pulled up the files. When I joined Vanguard 12 years ago, I had insisted on an addendum that excluded my prior work on routing algorithms from their intellectual property claims. Furthermore, Audrey had spent the night reviewing the filings that Vanguard had submitted to the court. Bradley Cross had attached an IP assignment agreement to their cease and desist letter. Bearing what appeared to be my signature, I leaned in to look at the screen. "That is not my signature," I said. "I never signed an assignment for the Pathfinder core architecture." I remember the exact meeting where they tried to slide that document into my stack of papers, and I refused to sign it, demanding they remove it. Bradley must have copied my signature from a project sign-off sheet and pasted it onto the assignment. It was a crude digital forgery, but they thought I would not have the resources to fight back in federal court. Audrey's eyes lit up. Are you certain? Yes, I said. I have the original unsigned draft in my personal archives, dated 3 days after that fake document. Bradley must have copied my signature from a project sign-off sheet and pasted it onto the assignment. Audrey stood up, smoothing her skirt. This is forgery, she said. Under the law, if a document is forged, it is void ab initio, meaning it has no legal effect from the very beginning. We are not going to settle, Harvey. We are going to file a federal counterclaim under Title 35 U.S.C. Section 271 for patent infringement because they are currently using your excluded IP in their commercial platform. And we are going to file a complaint for forgery under California Penal Code Section 470. We will make Bradley Cross explain his handwriting to a federal judge. We will also allege a breach of fiduciary duty against Bradley for wasting corporate assets by deploying a stolen, unstable version of your software and exposing the company to millions in liabilities. He thought he could bury you, but he just handed us the noose. The next blow was delivered not by the courts, but by a phone call from Nicholas Boyd. Nicholas was an operations manager at Vanguard, and one of the few people who had stayed silent during that steakhouse dinner, but had sent me a text afterward. Harvey, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, they just laid off the entire night shift in the Chicago warehouse. 17 people. Walked out with cardboard boxes at midnight. They are trying to cut costs to balance the losses from the midline contract. They didn't even give them severance. Just handed them a notice and had security escort them to the parking lot. I sat back in my chair. 17 people. I knew their names. I had worked with them during peak seasons, sharing cold pizza in the break room while the trucks rolled in. I knew their families, their struggles. Bradley Cross had cut them loose without warning to cover the holes in his budget. I called Audrey immediately. Can we use this? I asked. Audrey's response was immediate. The Warren Act, she said. Under Title 29 U.S.C. Section 2101, a company with more than 100 employees must give 60 days written notice before a mass layoff or plant closing. If they laid off 17 people from a single facility overnight without notice, representing a substantial portion of their active local workforce, they are in direct violation of federal labor law. The penalties are severe. They owe each worker back pay and benefits for each day of the violation, up to 60 days. I am going to contact the local warehouse union representative and file a complaint. We will add a class action labor violation to their list of problems. Later that evening, Oliver sent a link to our chat. Bradley was appearing on a local business podcast, sitting in a leather chair with a glass of whiskey, looking smug. We are not downsized, he told the host. We are optimizing. We are clearing out the dead weight to ensure our operational efficiency is lean and modern. Sometimes you have to make hard choices to protect the core business. We are moving toward a fully automated, cloud-based framework that does not rely on outdated, expensive personnel. I shut off the screen. The word dead weight rang in my ears. I remembered the sizzle of the steak, the clink of the glasses, and the way my colleagues had looked away. There was no room left for sympathy. The next day, we secured our biggest victory. PharmRx, the largest pharmaceutical logistics provider in the Midwest, signed a contract with TerraRoute. They had been monitoring Vanguard's system failures and were terrified of losing temperature-sensitive cargo during the summer heat waves. They moved their entire cold chain routing to our platform under a strict non-disclosure agreement. It was a $5 million contract, and it was the final nail in Vanguard's operational integrity. We configured our servers to monitor their refrigerated containers every 12 seconds, ensuring that any temperature fluctuation of more than half a degree would trigger an automatic route adjustment to the nearest cold storage facility. We ran extensive stress tests on the code to guarantee that even under extreme network load, the database replication lag remained below 200 milliseconds. Then came the email from Sarah Jenkins. She was an investigative journalist for a major financial news outlet who had been tipped off about the database failures at Vanguard. I have access to internal Slack logs, she wrote. I see references to your name and a system called Pathfinder. The metadata in their code repository still has your initials on the core modules. I want to know the truth. I met her at a quiet diner in Oak Park. The diner was old and smelled of grease and cold rain. Sarah Jenkins sat across from me in a booth near the kitchen. She ordered black coffee and didn't touch it. She was sharp, mid-30s, with the kind of eyes that look right through corporate spin. "I have access to internal logs," she said, her voice low. "I see references to your name and a system called Pathfinder. The metadata in their code repository still has your initials on the core modules, even though they tried to scrub them. I want to know the truth. Why were you pushed out?" I did not bring a flash drive, and I did not give her corporate secrets. I simply showed her my handwritten notebooks, my original patent filings, and the timestamps of my early code commits. I showed her the email I had sent to Bradley Cross 3 months before I was fired, warning him that the database indexes would fail if he did not upgrade the hardware. She looked at the diagrams, her pen moving fast across her notepad. She was amazed by the detail of our records. "This isn't just a corporate dispute," she said. "It is a deliberate cover-up of software theft and corporate forgery. They fired you to avoid paying your licensing fees and then forged your name to make the company look viable to investors." "Will you go on the record?" I looked out the window at the elevated train rattling past. "Yes," I said, "but only with the facts. No speculation, just the receipts." She nodded once. "The story will run on Monday morning," she said. "This will change everything." I walked back to my car feeling a strange, clean coldness. It wasn't the heat of anger. It was the quiet logic of a calculation coming to its inevitable end. The headline dropped at 6 a.m. on Monday. "Buried Code: How Vanguard Logistics Erased the Architect Behind Their System." The article was a devastating, detailed breakdown of Bradley Cross's mismanagement. It included screenshots of my original code commits side by side with Vanguard's current system errors. It quoted Sarah Jenkins' investigation into the forged signature on the IP assignment, citing Audrey Finch's federal filing under Title 35 U.S.C. Section 271. By noon, the article had been shared across every major logistics forum. By 2 p.m., Vanguard stock had dropped 12%, but the real collapse was happening on the highways. The temperature tracking system on Vanguard's Pathfinder platform failed completely during a heat wave in Indiana. A driver posted a video on social media showing his trailer temperature at 80 degrees while the official Vanguard driver app showed a clean 52 degrees. "My trailer is sweating and the lettuce is rotting," the driver said in the video, "but the app says everything is perfect. Which one do I believe, the cargo or the boss? This is a complete failure of the cold chain." The video went viral under the tag Vanguard Rot. Drivers began refusing to haul Vanguard loads, fearing they would be held liable for spoiled cargo. The industry was in chaos. In Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, state troopers were pulling over Vanguard refrigerated trucks because the cooling systems were failing, causing leaks and safety hazards. By Tuesday morning, the Department of Agriculture and the FDA had launched an inquiry into Vanguard's cold chain integrity. FarmRx immediately terminated their remaining contracts with Vanguard, citing a total failure of operational compliance. Their legal team sent a formal notice declaring their agreement void due to Vanguard's inability to guarantee safety standards. They shifted all their shipments to TerraRoute. "We managed the transition in less than 12 hours without a single temperature deviation, proving that our architecture was not just a theoretical improvement, but a commercial savior." The end came quickly. I was at my desk in Oak Park when the Bloomberg alert popped up on my screen. Bradley Cross had been removed as CEO by the Vanguard Board of Directors. The announcement was a brief, two-sentence statement referencing a transition of leadership and an internal investigation into financial irregularities, forgery, and labor violations. Nicholas Boyd texted me shortly after. "Bradley's office is empty," he wrote. "He left in the middle of the day. He didn't even pack his awards or his expensive desk clock." The board is in a panic, trying to figure out how to settle the patent infringement suit. They are already talking about bankruptcy reorganization because the client departures have wiped out their cash reserves. The next week, Julian Thorne organized a press conference in New York. The dummy LLC was dissolved, and TerraRoute was officially launched under the Thorne Capital umbrella. The room was all glass and whispers, no music, no banners, just thin paper lanyards and the quiet weight of capital in suits. I stood in the back of the room, wearing a clean suit, watching Julian speak to the press. We are launching a new era of logistics, he said, one built on technical integrity and respect for the people who build the code. A reporter in the front row raised her hand. Who designed this architecture? She asked. Julian stepped aside from the podium and motioned toward me. Harvey Vance, our chief technology officer, he said. I walked up to the microphone. The cameras flashed, and the room was quiet. I did not give a long speech, and I did not mention Bradley Cross. I simply looked at the audience. The code does not lie, I said. If you build a system on theft and shortcuts, it will eventually fall. We built TerraRoute on honesty, compliance, and precision. That is why it runs. The room stayed quiet for a long second, and then they started writing. There were no cheers, no celebrations, just the sound of pens on paper and keyboard clicks. That was exactly what I wanted. I didn't need their approval. I just needed them to understand the data. I stepped back and walked off the stage. I did not need the applause. The real victory was in the footer of the new TerraRoute login page. Architecture design Harvey Vance. It was written in small, clean letters, but it was permanent. Later that night, I drove past the old Vanguard office building. The parking lot was empty, and the large blue logo on the side of the building was dark. I pictured Bradley sitting in some co-working space, looking at his phone, watching our rollout. He was facing a federal grand jury for forgery and a class action lawsuit from the warehouse workers he had illegally laid off under the Warren Act. I did not feel angry anymore, and I did not feel vindictive. I just felt the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. I drove back to our Oak Park office, sat in my chair, and opened my laptop. The server hum was steady in the background, a low, rhythmic sound that felt like a heartbeat. The system was running clean, the routes were green, and my name was exactly where it belonged. The ghosts of the betrayal were gone, replaced by the silent numbers on the screen. The machine was humming perfectly, and I was the one holding the wrench. There was no more friction, just the smooth acceleration of a system built to last.